The doctor said his 3 daughters had days to live. Then he walked into the dining room, and what he saw there made him fall to his knees and weep. Marcus Sullivan hadn't cried in 20 years. Not when he lost his first business. Not when he buried his wife. But the day Dr. Elena Richardson said, "Your daughters have maybe 2 weeks left." That day something inside him shattered. Rebecca, Charlotte, Emma, 7 years old, dying. Leukemia had stolen everything. Their hair, their energy, their childhood. Now it was coming for their lives. Marcus stood in the hospital wing of his Massachusetts home, staring at 3 small bodies in hospital beds, tubes in their arms, machines beeping, their breathing so shallow you had to watch close just to know they were still alive. He'd spent millions, tried everything. Nothing worked. Emma, the smallest, opened her eyes. "Daddy, am I going to die?" Marcus's chest tightened. He knelt beside her. "No, baby. I promised your mama I'd protect you." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. He was losing them. The next morning, the house felt like a funeral home. No one spoke. The cook stopped making the girls' meals. The staff whispered in corners. Everyone had given up. Then she walked in. Sarah Mitchell, 29. No medical degree, no credentials, just quiet strength in her eyes. Mrs. Thompson, the head housekeeper, looked her over. "You're here for the job, honey. Trained nurses don't last 2 days here. This house is waiting for death." Sarah's voice was calm. Steady. "Then maybe it needs someone who's not." When Marcus saw her, he barely looked up. "The medical wing is off limits. My daughters need quiet." Sarah didn't move. "Mr. Sullivan. Dying children don't need quiet. They need someone who still believes they're worth saving." Marcus's head snapped up. Anger flashed in his eyes. "What did you just say? Your daughters don't need another person treating them like ghosts. They need someone who sees them as alive." Silence. Marcus stared at this stranger with nothing. No reason to care. No credentials, no logic. But her eyes held something he hadn't seen in months. Hope. "Do what you want," he muttered. "Just stay out of my way." Sarah walked into the girls' room. 3 hospital beds, white walls, the smell of medicine and death. She took off her gloves, touched Rebecca's face with her bare hand. Rebecca's eyes opened. "Who are you?" "Someone who's staying." Charlotte stirred. "Are you a nurse?" "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who believes tomorrow's coming." Emma whispered. "Everyone treats us like we're already gone." Sarah knelt beside her. "I don't see death when I look at you. I see 3 girls who still have fight left, and I'm not giving up." That night she sang to them a soft lullaby. For the first time in months they slept without fear. Sarah whispered into the darkness. "I couldn't save you, Rachel, but I'll save them." And God, who sees every tear, every prayer, was already moving. But what Marcus didn't know was that in 3 days everything would change. Before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because sometimes when everything feels hopeless, that's when miracles walk through the door. If you've ever needed a reason to believe again, keep watching. The next morning, Marcus woke to something he hadn't heard in over a year. Laughter, faint, fragile, but real. He sat up in bed, his heart pounding. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. But then he heard it again, a soft giggle coming from down the hall. He threw on his robe and walked toward the medical wing. The door was cracked open. Inside, sunlight poured through the windows that had been covered with blackout curtains for months. Sarah stood beside Rebecca's bed, holding a hairbrush like a microphone. She was singing badly on purpose. And Rebecca was smiling, actually smiling. Charlotte clapped weakly from her bed. Even Emma's eyes were open, watching. Marcus froze in the doorway. Sarah noticed him and stopped mid-on. "Good morning, Mr. Sullivan." He didn't respond. He just stared at his daughters, their faces still pale, still bald, but something was different. They looked awake. "What are you doing?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. Sarah set down the brush. "We're having breakfast." The girls wanted music. Music? Marcus's jaw tightened. "They're supposed to be resting." "They've been resting for months, Mr. Sullivan. Maybe it's time they start living." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but Rebecca spoke first. "Daddy. Miss Sarah made us laugh." His chest tightened. He hadn't heard Rebecca speak a full sentence in weeks. He turned and left without a word. Over the next 2 days, the house began to shift. Sarah didn't follow any rules. She opened windows, played music, brought flowers into the sterile medical wing. She sat with the girls for hours, not checking charts or administering medication, just talking, telling stories, listening, and somehow, impossibly, the girls started responding. They ate more, spoke more, moved more. Dr. Richardson came for her weekly visit. She examined the girls in silence. Her brow furrowed. "Marcus, I don't understand this." She looked up at him, confused. "Their vitals are stabilizing. Their appetite is returning. This shouldn't be happening without treatment." Marcus crossed his arms. "Then explain it." "I can't." Dr. Richardson glanced toward the doorway where Sarah stood quietly folding blankets. "But whatever's happening, don't stop it." That night, Marcus sat in his office, staring at medical reports that no longer made sense. The numbers said his daughters were dying, but his eyes told him something different. He heard footsteps in the hall. Sarah carrying a tray of empty teacups. "Why are you doing this?" he called out. She stopped, turned. "Doing what?" "This," he gestured vaguely. "The music, the stories, the hope. You know they're dying. Why give them false hope?" Sarah's eyes softened. "It's not false hope, Mr. Sullivan. It's just hope. And sometimes that's the only medicine that matters." She walked away, leaving him alone with his doubts. But deep down, beneath the pride, beneath the fear, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months. A flicker of belief. And that terrified him more than anything. 3 days passed. Sarah kept showing up. Every morning at 7 o'clock, never late, never asking permission. She'd walk into the medical wing like she owned it, pull back the curtains, and let the light flood in. The nurses didn't know what to make of her. She wasn't aggressive. She wasn't rude. She just existed in a way that made the rules feel small. Marcus watched from a distance. He'd stand in the hallway, arms crossed, listening to her talk to his daughters like they had years ahead of them, like there was no diagnosis, no death sentence. It made him angry. One morning, he overheard her in the kitchen talking to Mrs. Thompson. "I need party supplies," Sarah said. "Balloons, streamers, cake ingredients." Mrs. Thompson blinked. "Party supplies for what?" The girls turned 7 in 10 days. We're celebrating. The room went silent. Mrs. Thompson's face went pale. Miss Mitchell, those girls might not make it to their birthday. Sarah looked her straight in the eye. Then we make sure they do. Marcus stepped into the kitchen. His voice was ice. What did you just say? Sarah turned. Calm, unflinching, I said. We're throwing them a birthday party. A birthday party? Marcus's jaw clenched. For children who might not live to see it. You think that's kind? That's cruel. No, Mr. Sullivan. What's cruel is treating them like they're already gone. You don't know anything about. I know what it's like to sit beside a hospital bed and watch someone slip away. Her voice cracked just slightly. And I know the difference between giving up and giving them something to hold on to. Marcus stared at her. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Pain, recognition, something raw. Then he turned and walked out. Sarah didn't stop. She ordered the supplies herself. Paid with her own money, started planning decorations in secret. The nurses whispered. The staff thought she was delusional, but the girls, they came alive. Rebecca asked what flavor the cake would be. Charlotte wanted to wear a dress. Even Emma, who barely had the strength to sit up, asked if there would be candles. One afternoon, Sarah did something no one had dared to do. She got the girls into wheelchairs and took them outside. Marcus saw it from his office window. His 3 daughters, bald, pale, wrapped in blankets, sitting in the garden for the first time in months, sunlight on their faces. Sarah kneeling beside them, pointing at flowers, making them smile. Marcus gripped the edge of his desk. This woman had no right, no training, no reason to believe any of this would work. But his daughters were laughing, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd heard that sound. He turned away from the window, his chest tight. What are you doing to them? He whispered to the empty room. But deep down, a part of him already knew. She was giving them back their lives. And that meant he'd have to face what he'd been too afraid to give them himself. On the 5th day, something changed. Rebecca sat up on her own. Not for long, maybe 30 seconds, but she did it. No help, no one asking her to try. She just sat up. Sarah was reading to them when it happened. She paused mid-sentence, watching Rebecca's small frame straighten against the pillows. Look at you, Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Rebecca smiled. Weak but real. I wanted to see the picture. Charlotte reached out and touched her sister's hand. You did it, Beck. Even Emma turned her head, watching with wide eyes. It was small. So small, but it was everything. Dr. Richardson came that afternoon for her scheduled checkup. She examined Rebecca in silence, then moved to Charlotte, then Emma. When she finished, she just stood there staring at her clipboard. What is it? Marcus asked from the doorway. Dr. Richardson looked up. Her face was pale. Their white blood cell counts are improving. Marcus straightened. Improving? How much? Enough that I had the lab run the tests twice. She shook her head. Marcus, this doesn't happen. Not without active treatment. Not with leukemia this aggressive. So, what are you saying? I'm saying I don't know. She looked toward Sarah, who was quietly arranging flowers by the window. But something is working. Marcus followed her gaze. Sarah wasn't doing anything medical. She was just there, present, steady. Dr. Richardson lowered her voice. Whatever's happening in this room, don't question it. Just let it continue. She left. Marcus stood frozen, watching Sarah hum softly as she adjusted the vase. That night, he couldn't sleep. He walked the halls, restless, his mind spinning. For weeks, he'd thrown everything at this disease. Money, science, the best doctors in the world, and a woman with no credentials was doing what none of them could. He found himself standing outside the girl's room. The door was cracked open. Inside, Sarah sat in the chair between the beds, knitting something small and blue. "Why are you still here?" Marcus's voice came out quieter than he intended. "It's past midnight." Sarah didn't look up. "Because they sleep better when someone's close. The nurses can do that. The nurses check vitals. I'm just here." She glanced up at him. "There's a difference." Marcus stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp. His daughters slept peacefully, their breathing steady. He'd avoided this room for weeks. It hurt too much to see them like this. But now they looked different. Not healed, but not dying either. "You really think they're going to make it to their birthday?" he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah set down her knitting. "I think they're fighting, and as long as they're fighting, I'm not giving up." Marcus looked at her. "Really?" Looked at her. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Sarah's eyes held something deep. Something broken and beautiful all at once. "Just someone who made a promise," she whispered. Marcus wanted to ask more, but something in her voice stopped him. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Thank you," he said so quietly he wasn't sure she heard. But when he glanced back, Sarah was smiling. And for the first time in months, Marcus Sullivan felt something he thought was gone forever. Hope. Marcus started avoiding the medical wing. Not because he didn't care, because he cared too much. Every time he walked past that door and heard his daughters laughing, actually laughing, it broke something inside him. Something he'd worked years to build. Control, distance, the belief that emotions made you weak. He'd spent his whole life believing that money and power could solve anything. Now a woman with nothing was proving him wrong. It ate at him. On the 7th day, he found Sarah in the kitchen writing a list. Balloons, streamers, rainbow cake ingredients. He stood in the doorway watching her. She hadn't noticed him yet. "You're really doing this?" he said. Sarah looked up. No surprise, no fear, just that same calm she always carried. "Yes, they have less than a week left." His voice was harder than he meant it to be. "You're setting them up for disappointment." Sarah set down her pen. "No, Mr. Sullivan. I'm giving them something to look forward to. There's a difference. What if they don't make it? What if they do?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You don't understand what it's like to watch someone you love slip away. To know you can't stop it." Sarah's eyes flickered with something pain maybe, but she didn't look away. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't understand what that's like." The lie hung in the air between them. Marcus could feel it. But he didn't push. "I'm their father," he said. "I know what's best for them." "Then why haven't you spent more than 5 minutes in their room this week?" The words hit like a punch. Marcus stared at her, anger rising in his chest. "How dare you? I'm not trying to hurt you, Mr. Sullivan." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm trying to help you see them. Really see them. Before it's too late, Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to yell, to fire her, to throw her out, but he couldn't because deep down he knew she was right. He turned and walked away without another word. That afternoon, Sarah wheeled the girls out to the garden again. Marcus watched from his office window. He told himself he was just checking, making sure they were safe. But really, he was watching the way Sarah knelt beside Emma, pointing at a butterfly. The way Rebecca reached out to touch a flower. The way Charlotte tilted her face toward the sun, eyes closed, smiling. His daughters. When was the last time he'd really looked at them? Not at their diagnosis, not at their monitors. At them. He pressed his hand against the glass. Below, Sarah glanced up. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just held his gaze, and in that look, Marcus saw something that terrified him. She wasn't here to save his daughters. She was here to save him. He turned away from the window, his heart pounding. Outside, the girls laughed, and Marcus Sullivan, the man who controlled billions, felt more powerless than he ever had in his life. The morning of day 9, Marcus woke to silence. No laughter, no voices. His chest tightened. He threw on his robe and rushed down the hall. The medical wing door was open. Inside, the beds were empty. Panic hit him like ice water. Where are they? Where are my daughters? Mrs. Thompson appeared in the hallway. They're in the dining room, Mr. Sullivan with Miss Mitchell. Marcus didn't wait. He walked fast, his heart pounding. When he reached the dining room, he stopped. The table was covered with paper and crayons. Sarah sat in the middle, surrounded by all 3 girls. They were drawing, making birthday cards. Rebecca held up hers, a wobbly rainbow. Look, Daddy, for our party. Charlotte's had flowers. Miss Sarah said, we can each make one. Even Emma was coloring, her small hand moving slowly but deliberately across the paper. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway. This room, he'd locked it after Victoria died. Couldn't stand to look at it. Too many memories, too much pain. Now it was full of color, full of life. Sarah looked up at him. We needed more space. I hope that's okay. Marcus couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. Rebecca slid off her chair and walked toward him. Walked on her own. She took his hand. Daddy, will you help me finish mine? He looked down at his daughter, her bald head, her pale skin, but her eyes were bright. Alive, he nodded. Slowly, sat down beside her. Sarah handed him a crayon without a word. They sat there for an hour. Marcus drew clumsy flowers beside Rebecca's rainbow, listened to Charlotte talk about what dress she wanted to wear, watched Emma smile as she colored a sun, and somewhere in that hour, something inside him cracked. When the girls got tired, Sarah helped them back to their room for rest. Marcus stayed behind, staring at the drawings scattered across the table. Sarah returned a few minutes later. She started gathering the crayons. My wife used to sit here, Marcus said quietly. Every Sunday morning, she'd make pancakes. The girls would draw pictures while we waited. Sarah stopped, listened. After she died, I couldn't. I locked this room. Couldn't face it. His voice broke. I've been so afraid of losing them that I forgot to be their father. Sarah sat down across from him. It's not too late, isn't it? He looked at her, his eyes red. They're dying, Sarah. The doctor said a lot of things. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. But your daughters are still here, still fighting, and they need you in that fight. Marcus covered his face with his hands. I don't know how. Sarah reached across the table and placed her hand over his. You just show up, she whispered. That's all. You just keep showing up. Marcus looked at her through tears. And for the first time since Victoria died, he let himself cry. Sarah didn't move. Didn't speak, just sat with him in his grief. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, a father began to heal. The morning of their birthday arrived. Marcus woke early. His heart was heavy. He barely slept. 10 days ago, Dr. Richardson had given them 2 weeks. Today was day 10. His daughters were still alive. He walked downstairs and stopped at the dining room door. Inside, Sarah had transformed everything. Balloons hung from the ceiling. Streamers in every color covered the walls. The table was set with plates and candles, and in the center, a 6-layer rainbow cake. Each layer a different color. Marcus's breath caught. What is this? His voice came out rough. Sarah turned. She wore a simple dress. Her hair pulled back. It's a birthday party, Mr. Sullivan. Your daughters are 7 today. They might not. He stopped himself. Looked at the cake, the decorations, the love poured into every detail. They're here, Sarah said softly. That's what matters. An hour later, the girls came down. Rebecca wore a blue dress. Charlotte wore yellow. Emma wore pink. They were thin, bald, still so fragile, but they were smiling. Marcus stood against the wall, his arms crossed, trying to hold himself together. Mrs. Thompson brought in a cake, candles lit. 7 small flames flickering in the light. The girls stood together holding each other up. Make a wish, Sarah said. Rebecca looked at her sisters. Then at Marcus. Daddy, will you help us blow them out? Marcus's chest tightened. He couldn't move. Sarah's eyes met his across the room. Gentle, steady. He walked forward, knelt beside his daughters. Ready? Rebecca whispered. Marcus nodded. He couldn't speak. They leaned in together. All 4 of them in blue. The candles went out. The room erupted in applause. Mrs. Thompson wiped tears from her face. Even the nurse standing in the corner was crying, but Marcus didn't hear any of it. All he saw were his daughters alive, laughing. Here, he pulled them close, all 3 of them, and he broke. Sobs tore from his chest, deep roar, years of grief pouring out. I'm sorry, he choked. I'm so sorry. I've been so afraid of losing you that I forgot to love you. Rebecca wrapped her small arms around his neck. It's okay, Daddy. Charlotte pressed her face against his shoulder. We love you, Emma whispered. Don't cry, Daddy. We're still here. Marcus held them tighter, his whole body shaking. Across the room, Sarah stood with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. This moment, this impossible, beautiful moment, was everything she'd fought for. Marcus looked up at her through his tears. Thank you, he mouthed. Sarah nodded, smiled through her tears. And in that room, surrounded by balloons and cake and laughter, a father learned what he'd been too broken to see. His daughters didn't need him to save them. They just needed him to love them while there was still time. That night, Marcus didn't go back to his office. He stayed. He sat in the chair beside their beds, watching them sleep, their breathing steady, their faces peaceful. For the first time in months, he wasn't afraid to be close to them. Rebecca stirred, opened her eyes halfway. "Daddy, I'm here, sweetheart." She smiled. "You stayed. I'm not going anywhere." His voice cracked. "Not anymore." She closed her eyes again, her hand reaching for his. He held it, feeling how small and fragile it was. He'd spent so much time running, hiding in his office, making calls, trying to control what couldn't be controlled. But Sarah was right. All they needed was him present here. The next morning, something shifted in the house. Marcus didn't retreat to his office. He had breakfast with the girls, sat with them while Sarah read stories, helped them with their drawings. He was clumsy at first, didn't know what to say, how to just be, but they didn't care. Rebecca asked him to help her color. Charlotte wanted him to braid the wig she wore sometimes. Emma just wanted him to sit close, and Marcus did. One afternoon, he found Sarah in the hallway folding blankets. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Sarah looked up. "For what?" "For fighting you. For not trusting you." He paused. "For not seeing what you were really doing." Sarah smiled softly. "You were protecting them. That's all you knew how to do. You taught me something better." His voice was thick. "You taught me how to love them." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She didn't speak, just nodded. That evening, Marcus sat in the garden with the girls. The sun was setting, casting golden light over everything. Charlotte leaned against his shoulder. Rebecca played with a flower in her hand. Emma sat in his lap, quiet but content. "Daddy," Rebecca said. "Are we going to be okay?" Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to lie, to promise them forever. But he'd learned something in the last 2 weeks. Truth wrapped in love was better than false hope. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said gently. "But I know we're together, and that's what matters." Rebecca thought about that, then nodded. "Okay." They sat in silence, watching the sky turn pink and orange. Marcus closed his eyes, felt the weight of his daughters against him, the warmth of the fading sun. He whispered a prayer, something he hadn't done since Victoria died. "Please, if you're listening, give us more time." The wind stirred the trees, and for a moment, everything felt still, sacred, like God was close enough to hear, but Marcus didn't know. In 2 days, everything would shatter. 2 nights later, the storm came. Winter hit Massachusetts hard. Snow fell thick and fast. The wind howled against the windows, rattling the glass. By evening, the power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The emergency generator kicked in, but the house felt isolated, cut off from the world. Marcus checked on the girls. They were sleeping. Sarah sat in the chair between their beds, knitting by lamplight. "Storm's getting worse," he said quietly. Sarah nodded. "We'll be fine." Around midnight, Emma woke with a fever. Sarah felt her forehead. Her skin was burning. "Marcus," she called. Her voice was calm, but urgent. He was there in seconds. "What's wrong?" "She's spiking. We need to cool her down." They worked together. Cold towels, ice, but Emma's temperature kept climbing. Her breathing became shallow. Labored. Marcus grabbed his phone. No signal. He tried the landline. Dead. I'll drive to the hospital. You won't make it 10 feet in this snow. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Emma's lips started turning blue. Rebecca and Charlotte woke, their eyes wide with fear. What's wrong with Emma? Marcus knelt beside Emma's bed. Baby, stay with me. Please stay with me. But her eyes were rolling back. Her breathing stopped. The monitor flatlined. No. Marcus's voice broke. No, no, no. Sarah pushed him aside. She tilted Emma's head back, started compressions. Her hands moved fast, counting under her breath. Come on, sweetheart. Come back. 30 seconds. A minute. Marcus grabbed Emma's hand. Please, baby. I just found you again. Don't leave me. Please. Sarah kept going, tears streaming down her face, her voice cracking as she counted, breathe, baby. Breathe. Your daddy needs you. Your sisters need you. 2 minutes. Marcus collapsed, his forehead pressed against Emma's chest. God, please take me instead. Please, not her. Rebecca and Charlotte was sobbing. Emma, wake up. Sarah's hands never stopped, but her voice broke. Not you. Not you, too, Rachel. She caught herself, gasped, kept going. Come back, sweetheart. Please come back. 3 minutes, then a cough. Small, weak, but real. Emma's eyes fluttered open. Marcus's head shot up. She's breathing. Oh, God. She's breathing. He pulled her into his arms, sobbing into her hair. You're here. You're still here. Sarah collapsed back into the chair, her whole body shaking. Marcus looked at her through his tears. You called her Rachel. Who's Rachel? Sarah's face crumbled. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears pouring down. My daughter, she whispered. She was 6. Leukemia 5 years ago. Marcus's breath caught. Oh, God, Sarah. I couldn't save her. Sarah's voice broke. I held her just like this, but she didn't come back. She looked at Emma, alive in Marcus's arms. I promised her that night. I'd never let another child feel alone in the fight. Marcus reached out, took Sarah's hand. You kept your promise, he whispered. You saved her. You saved all of us. And in that moment, surrounded by storm and darkness, they understood. Healing wasn't just for the dying. It was for the living who'd forgotten how. 5 years later, spring came early to Massachusetts. The Sullivan estate looked different now. The gardens were full of color roses, tulips, wildflowers everywhere. The windows stayed open. Music played from somewhere inside, and laughter, always laughter. Rebecca, Charlotte, and Emma, now 12 years old, ran through the grass, their hair long and wild, their voices loud and free. No more hospital beds, no more monitors, no more fear, just life. Inside the kitchen, Sarah stood at the counter mixing batter for a rainbow cake. Marcus walked in, flour already on his shirt from helping earlier. He smiled. They're asking when it's ready. Tell them patience is a virtue, Sarah said, laughing. Marcus leaned against the counter, watching her work. You know, I never thanked you properly, Sarah looked up. For what? For saving my daughters. For saving me. Sarah shook her head gently. I didn't save anyone, Marcus. I just reminded you all that love is stronger than fear." He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. "You gave me my family back. You gave me myself back." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "And you gave me a reason to keep my promise." The kitchen door burst open. Rebecca, Charlotte, and Emma rushed in, breathless and grinning. "Is it ready yet?" Rebecca asked. "Almost," Sarah said, wiping her eyes quickly. Emma, once the weakest, now the loudest, grabbed Marcus's hand. "Dad, come outside. We want to show you something." Marcus let them pull him toward the door. He glanced back at Sarah. She smiled, nodded. He followed his daughters into the garden. They led him to a small tree they planted last fall. Tied to one of the branches was a ribbon, and hanging from the ribbon, a small wooden sign. Marcus leaned closer, reading the carved letters for Rachel, who taught us that love never dies. It just grows. His throat tightened. He looked at Sarah, who'd followed them outside. "They wanted to honor her," Sarah whispered. "The girl who started it all." Marcus pulled his daughters close, all three of them. Then he reached out and pulled Sarah in too. They stood there together, a family built not by blood, but by love that refused to quit. Above them, the sky was clear and blue. Somewhere beyond the clouds, a little girl named Rachel was smiling. Because her mother's love hadn't ended when she died. It had multiplied. That evening, they gathered around the table. The rainbow cake sat in the center, candles lit. But this time, the candles were for Sarah. "Happy birthday, Miss Sarah," the girls shouted. Sarah covered her face, laughing and crying at the same time. Marcus raised his glass. "5 years ago, you walked into our lives when we'd given up. You didn't bring medicine. You brought hope. You didn't save us with science. You saved us by teaching us how to live." He looked at her, his eyes full. To Sarah, the woman who did the impossible. To Sarah, everyone echoed. Sarah closed her eyes, made a wish, and blew out the candles. When she opened her eyes, she looked around the table at Rebecca's bright smile. Charlotte's gentle eyes, Emma's fierce grin, Marcus's grateful face. This was her promise kept, this was her healing, too. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, Marcus and Sarah stood on the porch watching the stars. "Do you think she sees this?" Marcus asked quietly. "Rachel." Sarah looked up at the sky. "I know she does." Marcus took her hand. "Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for learning how to fight." Sarah whispered. They stood in comfortable silence. And somewhere between heaven and earth, love whispered back, "Well."